A very big welcome to all of you from wherever you are watching. I want to wish you a happy new year, a blessed one. And I pray that God will use this teaching to encourage you, um, to help you in many ways, which I believe God has helped me in this area. And I want to today share with us the life or the character of Gideon, because there are so many things we can pick out from Gideon's life and then align them to how we should worship. Because there are so many other small problems that we carry along that we hardly notice, at times hinder us from worshiping the Lord. Gideon was a man who had his own fears, his own worries, just like any one of us. But even as you watch and listen, I pray that the Lord will help you. I pray that the Lord will bless you. I pray that there will be increase and that your part of worship will expand in this year. So, starting off, you find Gideon was a man living in times of the Midianites who are invading their land, destroying their crop, stealing their crop. And there was almost nobody there who could fight, who could lead, gang up the Israelites to go fight. So God had to come and pick up Gideon um, as one of the judges to go fight for the Israelites. The name itself, Gideon, simply means great destroyer or a great warrior. But if you look and read the qualities of the character of Gideon, you find he was a very fearful man, uh, because he was dealing with the Midianites, and that was a fierce tribe. They were good in fighting, and they came in and destroyed. But when you read Judges chapter 6, verse 12, the Lord appears to him, and the Lord says to him, he calls him, "Thou mighty man of valor." And Gideon does not believe it. How can the Lord see him as a man of valor when his own people are being destroyed, are being impoverished, or are suffering in the hands of the Midianites? So he's so much doubtful, but I can assure you the Lord took him through a process, a journey, to talk to him, to encourage him, even to bear with him when he says, "Okay, let me go into the house, let me prepare some food, and wait here. I serve you. I want to confirm that who you are." And the angel of the Lord said, "Sure, I'll wait here." And eventually he brought the food, and the angel of the Lord said, "Lay it upon the rock." And he did that, and the angel of the Lord stretched forth his stick, touched the food, and it was consumed by fire. It was a process that the Lord was taking Gideon through, which I believe also He's taking us through. You might not understand what worship is, you might not know what it is, but the Lord will bear with you. He will take you slowly until you come to the point where you understand, you know, and you can practice what God desires. So when you read Judges, remember we are in Judges. Maybe we might move into other scripture, but in Judges chapter 6, verse 17 to 24, this is where he has his encounter with the angel of the Lord. In verse 25 to 27, he is commanded to build an altar by the Lord. But first, before he builds this altar, he must destroy the altar of Baal. And that was one big thing that Gideon had to do. He said yes, but he said to himself, "I would rather do it at night when nobody is seeing or watching rather than day." So him and a few of his friends went and destroyed um, the altar of Baal. The point I want to make here is that there are so many things that we need to overcome. Many of us have fears, the fears of even raising our hands in church, because you wonder how will people see me when I start raising up my hands. Many of us have the fear of crying before the Lord. Even when you feel the presence of God is upon you and you're broke, your heart is broken, you feel like I cannot show my tears, because as we say, men don't cry, but I want to tell you, great men cry. And I want to encourage you that as you worship God, do not be overcome by fear, what people are going to say or think about you. You are in the presence of the Lord, and it is between you and Him. And therefore, he goes in, he destroys the altar of Baal. And remember, the Midianites were a fierce people. But in verse 28 to 30, the next morning, the inhabitants wake up only to find the altar of Baal has been destroyed. And therefore, there is a big problem. They call his father Joash, and they ask around, and they are told it is Gideon, the son of Joash. So finally, Joash the father is called, and he's asked to produce his son. But eventually, Joash says, if Baal is Baal, let him fight for himself. You should not be seen as human beings trying to fight for Baal. If really indeed he's strong, he's alive, let him fight for himself. And surely they did that. But I'm trying to emphasize on the fear that he had to do things at night instead of doing them during the day. And many of us also go through the same thing. We have so many fears, and at times they are not spoken, not seen, but deep within us, we have certain fears that even maybe our spouses or maybe our friends do not know. And therefore, you come to a point where when you come to the presence of God, you want to worship, you have that fear of what will people say when they see me lying in the presence of God, lying on the floor in the presence of God, lifting up my hands. I want to encourage you, everything should be spontaneous. It's not something you think over. It's not something you plan that I'm going to fall over or rather fall on the floor to worship God. When the presence of God comes, things happen spontaneously. It's not something you plan. And therefore, fear controlled Gideon. I would pray that do not allow fear to control you. But also, if you read verse 33 to 35, you'll find the Midianites were a tribe that really fought Israel fiercely, and they wanted to destabilize them because we would say they are the enemies, they were the enemies of worship because Israel as a nation worshipped the true God. But, and they saw the blessing of God. They say they saw the favor of God upon Israel. And so every time the attack on Israel by the Midianites, it was sometimes meant to disrupt their time, their peace. And there are so many things that attack our peace to the point where we cannot worship or serve the Lord properly. But I want to encourage you that God has a good plan for each one of us. And as I said, He is very long suffering. He is very loving. He's very caring. The things you don't understand, just put an effort to want to know. and it will come to pass. He will actually teach you after a few, maybe a year or a few months, you'll look back and see that indeed I was taken through a process. It is never a quick fix. Um, when God called, who is this, Moses, he was 40 years. He prepared him for another 40 years. Now, I'm not discouraging you. You might say, if I have to wait for 40 years, then I'll be gone out of this world. But that is not the point. 40 years could be a day or a week, a month. But I'm just encouraging you that God takes time to mold somebody for his own glory. Therefore, you find Israel as a nation that desired to worship God, and indeed they worshipped God. They had three enemies who really fought them all the time. You had the Midianites, you had the Amaleks or Amalekites, you had the Edomites. Those three tribes. That's why I wanted to share. They are very close to Israel, but also their fiercest enemy. And I can assure you today, some of the things that are hindering you are not from without. They are all from within. They are very close to you and very dear and loving to you. But I want to encourage you that worship has many hindrances. You'll find so many things that crop up that will hinder you from worshiping. And when you do that, when that happens, I would encourage you, instead of complaining and murmuring, be the kind of person, whatever your situation is, turn it into worship. I know it is hard, but there's something called the sacrifice of worship, where despite your pain, despite whatever you're going through, and deep within you, there is that desire to complain, to murmur, and to be angry. But you turn your mourning into dancing. Take that, whatever is happening in your life, and go before God and worship Him. Not so much telling Him what He has not done, but telling Him who He is and what He has done, because God has helped you before. Yeah, He has helped you before. You can look back and step on what God did yesterday to stand before Him and declare His goodness and His mercy over your life. So there are three enemies. Um, the meaning of Midian, as I said, or rather, if I didn't mention it, it means a place of judgment, war, or battle. That's the meaning of Midian. And Midian, from who comes out the Midianites, was the son of Abraham with his concubine Keturah. They gave birth to Midian in Genesis 25, verse 1 to 4. Now you can see the closeness that the Midianites should have been so close to help the Israelites, but that did not happen. And then the origin of the problem between the Midianites and the Israelites, you find it in Genesis 25, verse 5 to 6. And I want to quote and read. And Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac, but unto sons of the concubines, Abraham gave gifts and sent them away from Isaac his son. So you see, Abraham was a wealthy person. He had so much. But when the children became of age and Isaac became of age, he didn't want them to interfere with God's plan in Isaac's life. So what he did, the wealth that he had, he gave it to Isaac. And all other children who were Abraham's children born from his concubines, he gave them gifts. We're not told how big or small the gift is, but you can imagine from what we have read, everything he had, he gave it to Isaac. I believe that's where the animosity came in, because Isaac was given everything, and the rest were left. I mean, they had gifts, but maybe not sustainable for a long time. So they had that anger, that bitterness in them against the descendants of Isaac and Jacob. So that anger went on for a long time. And I want to encourage us that sometimes we see, even within families, where one child appears to be favored by the parents, and if we don't watch out, you'll find that child that is not favored breeds anger against the child who appears loved, who appears to be given gifts, and if we don't watch out, it might destroy that relationship completely. So I want to encourage you that have a balance. Love the children, all of them, no matter their capacities, their abilities, love them. So those were the Midianites. Then you had the Amalekites. The Amalekites were also a very fierce tribe. And it's good for you to know that Amalek was the son of Esau's firstborn. He's called Eliphaz. You can read that in Genesis 36, verse 12. Yeah, verse 12. He had Amalek, Esau's first son, Eliphaz, married Timnah, and out of that union, Amalek was born. Now, remember, Esau and Jacob were from the same mother, but there was a big problem because Jacob was favored and Esau was not favored. And so Jacob stole the birthright of Esau, and Jacob became the blessed one, and Esau was never blessed, even though he was blessed, but not as what Abraham, or rather Jacob received. So the third group is the Edomites, coming from the name Esau. Esau was also called Edom. You should remember that the story I've just told you, that Esau was loved by the father because he was a hunter, and Jacob was loved by the mother because he stayed around the mother. And the time when it came, when Esau had come back from hunting, he came hungry and he asked his brother to give him some food. And then he despised his birthright. And Jacob told him, if you want to get some food, you have to hand me your birthright. And carelessly, he said, that's fine. He ate his food, and that was the end of his birthright. He was senior, yes, in age, oh yeah, but in the area of being blessed, Jacob was blessed. So finally, when Esau discovers that my brother has conned me, he ran away to his uncle Laban and stayed there. Then he married the two daughters of Laban. And after a long time, when he was returning back to his land, on his way, he had now been blessed with sheep and everything. He had two wives and children. And as they were walking back, he heard his brother Esau was on his way to come and meet him. If you read Genesis chapter 36, verse 1 to 9, um, then you'll realize what we are talking about. So when he realized he was coming, he had to separate the women and the children and the animal, and then he went first to see what would happen. But when he encountered Esau, Esau came running to him. Uh, in Genesis 33, verse 4, it says, "But Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they wept." It would appear they had forgiven each other. It would appear Esau had no issue with his brother. That's what, yeah, it would appear. But I want to tell you, the descendants of Esau understood what happened to their father, understood what Jacob did to their father. And therefore, you find that pain, that anger, even though Esau and Jacob seems to embrace and kiss and cry together, the descendants of Esau really were angry with the descendants of Jacob. So you realize that as Israel was coming back from Egypt on their way to Canaan, they were supposed to pass through the land of the Edomites. And they sent appeal to the king of Edom and said, "We are your relatives. We won't drink your water. Our animals won't drink your water. We don't need corn. We don't need anything for animals. We just need a safe passageway through your land." And the king of Edom said, "No, you'll not pass here." And indeed, he sent an army to try and fight them. They were so bitter that even people who were passing through their land, they would not give them access. It tells you something, that some of the things that hinder us from worshiping are not happening to us today in terms of family, but you find maybe your father, his brother did something to him many years back, but that thing that happened has never been broken, forgiven. The children still hate their cousins, or the children of their uncle, and therefore you find there is quite a big problem. I want to encourage you, because if you read the story of Esau all the way to the book of Malachi, you realize they were a stubborn kind of people, because God says, "I will destroy," and they say, "You destroy, we will build it." And finally, we don't hear so much about them. But suffice it to say that some of the things, the pain we carry from the people who hurt our parents, our relatives, sometimes even when people come to you who are your relatives, you are supposed to help them. You don't, because that pain is still there and you'd rather not help them. Instead, you start fighting them, not physically, but with words. So worship does not come out genuinely, because worship is about loving God. Loving God is about loving people, caring for them, wishing them well. And the Lord says, "Worship me in spirit and in truth." In that, deep within you, if you love God, then and if there's truth, which is being coming out from the Spirit of God that is in you, then it should not come to the point where you hate your relative, you hate your friend, and that's not the best thing to do. I encourage you to deal with those things, some of the fears, some of the problems you're going through. You have families which come to a point where maybe they're competing. One family, they're well learned. They're relatives. One family is well learned. Another one, they are struggling. Those who are struggling um, might feel like the ones who have made it, they are not the best. And so, therefore, instead of loving them and asking for advice, they would rather malign them, they would rather backbite them, they would rather be jealous, they would rather be envious. And then you find there are no family relationships. People won't sit down and talk and just have a good time. This is the story of Israel and the relatives from the tribe of the tribe of the Amalekites, the Edomites, and the Midianites. And you find all these battles that have happened, um, they pushed Israel to seek God. They pushed Israel to rely on God because these were a fierce tribe. Many of the things you are going through, they're overwhelming. That should push you to worship and seek God. You should not run away or cower in fear. You should face that problem and worship. In fact, even when the enemies came to fight, God had to speak and give them charge on what to do. Do not fight a physical battle. This battle is spiritual. And what God has started, He will end it. He has you in His hands. And He says nobody will snatch you from Him. Therefore, you are protected. As you come into worship, as you build that altar of worship deep within you, make sure you destroy the altars uh, that are not of God. Anger, um, bitterness, envy, jealousy. You see, these are some of the small, small things. In fact, even in the book of, I think the Song of Solomon, he says, catch for us the small foxes. He had a cry because even when the flowers are blossoming, the foxes would come up and destroy. Some of the little, little things are what hinder you or hinder us from worship. I want to encourage you today that build that altar, your heart. Get rid of everything that hinders you from worshiping God properly. And as you do that, you'll find that the Lord will bless you. The access into the presence of God will be so easy because your heart is in line and in tune with God Himself. So I want to end it here. I want to thank you so much for watching. If you have not subscribed, kindly do so. You can like, put your notifications on, button on, share with friends. And I want to encourage you that you are a blessing. Wherever you're watching, I've seen so many subscribe. I want to encourage those that have not to do so. And in doing so, um, I'll be sharing more. In fact, soon after this one, I want to share something else to be a blessing to you. So may the Lord bless you and may He keep you. May He give you favor and great understanding in the days ahead. God bless you.